Okay, welcome back, everybody, one and all, to the greatest show on YouTube. It's the greatest show because it's about the greatest topic in the world, which is, of course, geography. Geography is everything! Wano edition. We got a lot of stuff to cover. The Wano arc just finished up in the manga. This is going to cover heavy spoilers. So if you haven't finished reading Wano yet, or you're not even at Wano yet, or you don't even know what a Wano is, not the video for you. But we have a lot of moving parts here, so let's just get right to it. Play that intro. It's been a long time. I would like to take you all on a marvelous journey to a land filled with massive koi fish, a man with a funny voice, and a giant dragon who may also be a duck. I would like to take you all to Wano country. Haha, yeah. And you know what? I am really glad I waited until Wano properly ended for me to make a video on Geography is Everything, you know, because people were sending me comments when the invasion at Onigashima was going on, like, Tekking, just go ahead and make the Geography video on Wano, you know, Oda's done explaining all of it, and I'm sitting there like, maybe I should, but I'm like, no, because I know the kind of guy Oda is. Oda is the kind of dude that would wait until, like, 3 chapters before the end of the arc to reveal something huge about the geography of Wano. And hey, guess what happened? 3 chapters before the end of the arc, Oda revealed something big about the geography of Wano that would have completely changed everything had I made the video earlier. So I'm glad I waited. Here we are. And you know what? This is difficult to even begin the conversation, okay? Because, like, even if I were to just say, like, Wano is an island, those 4 words right there require a bunch of asterisks added to the end of it. Like, Wano is an island, asterisk, 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 at least 3 of them, right? So we have to start with that, but just to give you the bare bones of this, okay. Wano is based off of Japan. All right, that is at least a baseline we can start with, okay? All of the islands, or at least most of the islands that the Straw Hats visit in One Piece, are based off of various countries and areas in our world, sometimes more historical than modern day, but all around in general, all right? Water 7 is based off of Venice, Alabasta is based off of Egypt, mostly like ancient Egypt, with like Horus and everything like that. And Wano is based off of Japan, specifically the Edo period of Japan during the Tokugawa shogunate, but there's some other stuff thrown all throughout. Even Yamato, Yamato's name, Yamato was like the original capital or one of the original capitals of Japan way back in the day. And also, little fun fact about Oda, I don't know if you knew this, but he's Japanese. So this is his, like, homeland. This is where he grew up and was born and raised and everything. So obviously he would know more about the history and geography of Japan than other places of the world. So I also imagine there'd be a lot more of a desire to make sure that Wano was a really good arc, that the geography made sense, that the world really came alive. And also, all of the residents of Japan reading One Piece are going to be like, oh, Oda referenced that region of Japan. That's where I'm from. Or he referenced that historical event. I just learned about that. You know what I mean? Because it's in the culture, because he's literally adapting his homeland into One Piece as an island, right? So let's start with that. A lot of references to Japan here. So if you're not, like, super well versed in Japanese history, I'm not going to go way into it because there's a lot of stuff that even goes over my head, and I'm a big history buff and everything like that, but even so, there's like way more details in this than I could probably ever, get into. But yeah, let's go back and start with Wano is an island with, like, the 3 asterisks. I can't say that word. 3 stars at the end of that sentence. Okay. So the first point is, it's not really so much an island, but when you approach it, it looks more like a mesa, because there's this giant earthen wall that, like, stretches, like, over a mile up into the sky, and Wano's on top of that. However, it is still technically an island, because when you get to the top of that mesa, there's a giant lake, and then in the center of that lake is Wano. However, it actually turns out that it's not a proper island, because it's not a mesa, because those walls are actually, created artificially somehow. We don't really know. And the original island of Wano was just a regular island that was, like, at sea level with a giant mountain Mount Fuji in the center, and then the original people that populated Wano built a town and cities and stuff around Mount Fuji at the base. But then after these walls were constructed, after centuries and centuries of rainwater constantly building up, and these giant walls exist and there's no way for the water to escape, their original homeland got effectively flooded and is now underwater. So the original people of Wano had to travel up Mount Fuji, and they kind of like moved around some earth, and they reconstructed an entirely new island of Wano near the top of Mount Fuji. Also, fourth asterisk on that, because the entire country of Wano may or may not be the ancient weapon known as Pluton, but that's a discussion for another day, man. We don't even know how that works, okay? But at any rate, yeah, at some point, Wano looked like this, then giant walls were built, then it flooded, so the people had to move up the island, move on top of Mount Fuji, and then they had to build the current Wano, which the Straw Hats visit in the context of the current storyline of One Piece. Okay, so that's just the basic stuff, and ironically enough, we're kind of going backwards here because we don't find that out until the very, very end of the Wano arc. So now we can sort of double back and go back to the beginning of the arc when the Straw Hats actually approach the island for the first time. Now, given the fact that there are these giant walls that are, you know, covering the entire island, you may wonder how exactly do you get into Wano, right? Well, it's actually not as hard as it may look. There's actually 3 ways to gain access to Wano outside of using like some kind of flying machine. Like, obviously, if Vegapunk were to build a plane or a blimp, or if Eneru came back in the Maxim, you could just land on top of Wano. Also, like Aramaki, any Devil Fruit user that has the ability of flight, such as Marco as well, could just fly back to the top of Wano, you know, easy peasy lemon squeezy. However, if you don't have the ability to fly, then there's only 3 options for you. 2 of them are fairly difficult, and 1 of them is, you know, reasonably simple compared to the other 2. So, because these giant walls are filled with rainwater, the rainwater is beginning to spill over the side in the form of 2 waterfalls. One of these waterfalls is located close to the Kuri region of Wano, and another waterfall is located next to Onigashima. So you can either head up both of these waterfalls, however, now you're having to ascend a waterfall that's spilling over the side of these giant earthen walls. So now we get to the point where we have to ask ourselves, how high up is Wano? Like, how tall are these giant earthen walls that were constructed, okay? Not even worrying about how they were constructed, because we just don't know, but how tall are they? All right, okay, so for this one, and I really apologize to everybody in advance, I had to use math, so I probably got this wrong, but it was the best I could do, all right? Okay, so first off, I needed something to compare the walls to, and luckily we do, actually, Mount Fuji. Now, is the Mount Fuji in Wano the same height as the Mount Fuji in our world? Probably not, but once again, since Oda is taking so much inspiration, later on we're going to find out that each of the regions of Wano are actually based off of actual regions and islands in the Japanese archipelago, and considering it's Mount Fuji in Wano and Mount Fuji in real life, he just went ahead and used the same name. I'm going to assume that it might be around the same height, okay? So let's just go with that. Mount Fuji in our world, Japan, is about 3,776 meters tall, or about 12,389 feet tall, okay? And we get a really good map that Oda actually shows us when Sukiyaki is explaining, how the original Wano got submerged and the giant walls and everything like that. We get a really good diagram. I'll show you my crappy MS Paint diagram, but for the actual calculations, I use the actual manga panel, okay? And so what I did was I'm like, okay, well, let's measure the mountain in the manga panel to a certain scale, and then compare it to the height of Mount Fuji in our world, and so then we might be able to calculate how tall the walls are, okay? Still probably not going to be perfectly accurate, but I gave it a shot, all right? So I took the manga panel, I used an actual ruler, measured Mount Fuji from base to tip, which came out at around the scale I was using, about 7 inches, which is pretty commendable, I have to say. Anyway, so I'm looking at that, I'm like, okay, Mount Fuji is about, 3,776 meters in our world, 7 inches, so every inch is about 540 meters, and I'm rounding up just to make it simple, okay? So with that being said, at this scale, there was about 4 inches that were under the water where the walls were, and that goes up to about 2,160 meters, or about about 1.3 miles tall, okay? So, like I said, it's probably not that exact number in the story, and I don't even think we're ever going to get an exact number for how tall the walls surrounding Wano are. But, like, still, 1.3 miles up, that's pretty damn high. That's not as high as, like, the Drum Rockies at, Drum Island that Luffy had to scale, free climb that damn thing. But still, I mean, getting any boat, any ship up 1.3 miles of sheer rock ascending a waterfall, that's no cakewalk. That's no, 1.3 miles. Pfft. Could Luffy have climbed it on his own? Sure, he easily could have. But getting a whole ship up there, that's going to be pretty difficult to do, right? And then with that also being said, there were 3 inches of Mount Fuji that were still, on top of Wano that we see right now in the story. Like whenever we see Mount Fuji in the background, which would put Mount Fuji that can actually be seen from Wano at about 1,620 meters, or about just 1 mile tall. Which is still, like, if you look at a mountain that's a mile up, I mean, that's pretty tall. And also, Wano's Mount Fuji is a lot more narrow than the Mount Fuji in our world, okay? There's a lot of innuendos here. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to give you a basic, rough ballpark estimate at the height of these walls of Wano. So, like, when the Straw Hats had to ascend the waterfall, and then, more importantly, in one of the last chapters where they jumped off of the waterfall, they're literally falling almost 2 miles straight down. I mean, no, 1.3 miles straight down. That's a big deal, okay? So, yeah, you just fall a mile from anything, it's gonna be insane, okay? So you can see why Nami was so upset with Luffy in the last chapter, like locking him in the cage and everything like that. All right, so the way you actually ascend the waterfall is, because it's actually rainwater that's spilling over the side, not salt water, giant koi fish actually live inside of this lake, inside of the walls of Wano, and they actually spill out into the water outside of Wano. I'm not really sure what happens to the koi fish after they hit the ocean, if they would just die because they're entering salt water, or if the water around Wano sort of circulates. So maybe the koi fish travel down one of the waterfalls on one end of the island, and then they travel up another waterfall on the other side of the island. I'm not really sure. It's this perpetual loop of koi fish. Anyway, giant koi fish. When the Straw Hats first arrived there, it had the impression of a ukiyo-e painting, which is like an old school, kind of Japanese art that stretches back a very, very long time ago. I think the oldest ones exist around like the 8th century that we know of. So it's been around for a while, these prints of ukiyo-e. And so that's just another idea of like Oda being like, yep, we're in Japan now. Here we go, right? The Straw Hats are entering Japan. Okay, so the way that Luffy did it was essentially you can like grab onto one of the koi fish, and then the koi fish will pull you up the waterfall. This is in reference to Japanese folk tale where koi fish can ascend, the waterfall, and they become a dragon, which also ties into Kaido's devil fruit ability, the Azure Dragon. There you go, which is also the fish fruit. So you see how it all sort of connects, okay? But yeah, as long as you could basically hitch a ride on the koi fish, whether by grabbing the koi fish and riding them up yourself, or like Big Mom's ship, like wrapped around like ropes and stuff around the koi fish to tow the ship up. However way you do it, once you reach the top of the waterfall, you're now basically in a giant artificial lake of fresh water, and if you sail, a little bit more into the, the top of this mesa, essentially. It's not a mesa because there's not flat land. It's a lake at the top. But if you keep sailing, then you'll eventually hit proper Island of Wano, which is the new Wano, not the old Wano, which is at the bottom of the island, which is currently flooded. All right, is everybody on the same page here, all right? Because we're not even into the individual regions yet, all right? I don't know how long this video is, probably at least 15, 20 minutes. We're not even into the actual regions of Wano yet, all right? Yeah, but I think I covered everything in terms of the immediate surroundings. Oh yeah, there's also these giant, I actually have a picture of them here. So this is actually a big book on Imperial China that I'm reading right now. It's a visual history book, and I love visual history books. But anyway, this is Zhangjiajie National Forest Park. And these are these giant pillars that are made out of sandstone and quartzite. And so these are very famous. You've probably seen these before. These are actually shown in Dragon Ball a lot, because a lot of Dragon Ball takes place like Journey to the West and everything like that. So as you're approaching the land of Wano, though, there are these giant stone pillars that are jutting out of the ocean surrounding Wano. Maybe they have something to do with the creation of the wall. Maybe there was some sort of like, these are prototypes for the wall or something like that. I'm just realizing this actually has some parallels to both Game of Thrones and Attack on Titan a little bit. I don't know how these walls were built or something. Maybe there's titans inside of the walls. I don't know. But there are these giant pillars that look very similar to the ones in Zhangjiajie National Park, all right, in China. So just to reference that there. Okay. So with that being said, now that there's one more way to gain access to Wano, which is the easy route, and that is through the Mogura port, which is a underground port you can basically sail into. We don't know where the entrance is outside of Wano. I'm assuming somewhere along the giant expansive wall, there's a tunnel that you can enter, and then you go in this tunnel, and it's basically a giant elevator which hoists you to the very top, and then you get to skip over the waterfall and all that crap. But I guess it's also doesn't provide any exit for the water, because the water still is inside and not escaping, you know what I mean? So I guess that was an artificial construct to get around that system. Could have actually been built maybe by Kaido or Orochi, just so it makes it easier for Kaido's men to get in and out of Wano, so they don't have to go up the waterfalls each and every time, because Kaido's been in control in Wano for well over 25 years or so. He arrived there. So yeah, it might be something like that. All right, so now we're going to be getting into the actual regions of Wano. Here I'm just going to show you the standard map for Wano that we see in the story, okay? So there are 5 regions on mainland Wano, and then there's one extra region that is to the side of Wano, its own individual little island known as Onigashima, which is where Kaido has his fortress. We are not going to be discussing Onigashima geography here. That will be a separate installment of Geography is Everything, because Onigashima, we know a lot about that as well. There's the whole fortress, the whole layout of that, Muffin Mountain, everything. So that's going to be a separate video, but it will be referenced here. Okay, so as for mainland Wano, it has 5 major regions. Each of these regions are named after a type of food, so there's like a little bit of a pun to go along with the names. As well with that, each of the regions are actually given a parallel to modern-day Japan. So there's different regions and islands of Japan, and each of the regions in Wano correspond to that. It's at this point in the video that I want to give a massive shout out to Artur over at the Library of Ohara, because he helped me out big time with this, okay? So back in SBS 100, we got this image right here. Oda just revealing a sketch art of the original concept of Wano. As you can see, Wano actually used to have all of the islands on one side, and then Onigashima used to be to the north of it, okay, which is sort of similar to how the actual modern-day Japanese archipelago looks, with Honshu, Shikoku, Kyushu, and then Kyushu, and then Hokkaido at the very top, okay? So this is how Wano was originally supposed to look until Oda changed it, so it's now in the position that we know in the series, okay? Well, Oda also wrote down in Japanese, like, the different regions that correspond to what, and some of them I could make out, but not all of them, so I asked Artur to help me out, and he really came through. He sent me this map, and he sent me all the different regions, like, okay, these regions mean, these comparisons to modern-day Japan, and here's the kanji, and here's their food references. He really went above and beyond, so go check out his Twitter, go check out his website, Library of Ohara. All those links are down there below, so thank you to Artur. All right, so we're going to name all the regions, and then, the food reference, as well as the region of modern-day Japan, which it's based off of, and then we'll go into each region individually to take a closer look into the geography of Wano. That sound good to you? That sounds good to me. All right. We're trugging along in this video. This took me a while. I don't script my videos or anything, so I take notes and things. I was up for about 2 hours last night just taking notes and just piling everything together just so we can get to this point. Like, 2 pages. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to, mention here. All right. So the first region we're going to talk about is the region that's furthest to the left here on the map, and that is the KURI region. The KURI region is based off of real-life Kyushu, and the food it's referenced is actually not curry. I thought that for a long time. I thought the food reference for the KURI region is curry. But no, in Japanese, curry is actually pronounced more with like a kare. That's like how you pronounce it, kare, in Japanese. So not curry, kare, not exactly right. No, it's actually referencing Japanese chestnuts, all right? Which are chestnuts that are like very different from the normal kind of chestnuts that you probably eat. They're in like this spiky plant that you have to like crack open and remove the chestnuts. Pretty interesting, but I actually didn't know that. Artur is actually the one that told me that. So that's the KURI region. Then to the right on the top, we have the KIBI region. KIBI is in reference to the
Chugoku region of Japan, and it's Kibi or Kibi Dango that is the reference to the food there. Below the region of Kibi, we have the region of Udon, which the food reference here should be pretty obvious. It's just udon, and it's based off of the island and region of Shikoku, one of the 5 main islands of the Japanese archipelago. To the right of udon, we have the HAKUMAI region. HAKUMAI is based off of Chubu in Japan, and it's in reference to steamed white rice. Above HAKUMAI, we have the region of RINGO. RINGO just means apple in Japanese, so the food reference is also pretty obvious there. And it is based off of Tohoku, which is a region of Japan that's to the northern end of Honshu. So that's the thing that was getting me a little confused, is that I know there's 5 major islands in the archipelago of Japan. I mean, I think the overall archipelago includes like 1,500 islands altogether, but there's 5 major ones. So I thought each region had to be named after one of the islands. But Honshu is the biggest one, so there's actually 5 more regions that are divided inside of Honshu, okay? So Shikoku, Hokkaido, and Kyushu are their own regions and their own islands, but Honshu is the biggest, so it has a bunch of regions inside of it, okay? So that's where Ringo is Tohoku, Hakumain is Chubu, and Kibi is Chugoku, are the different regions in the island of Honshu. Okay, are we following along so far? Okay. Then right dead center is the flower capital, which is also where Mount Fuji is located, or at least the tip of Mount Fuji is located. And I don't think anybody should really be surprised by this. Mount Fuji, as well as the region of the flower capital, is based off of the actual Mount Fuji and the capital of Tokyo in Japan, which actually used to be named Edo during the Edo period before it was changed. So will Momonosuke change the name of the flower capital now that he's back as the shogun? Who knows? But yeah, Edo changed the name to Tokyo, which Tokyo literally just translate with the kanji to Eastern capital. That's all it means. And I think that happened at the end of the Edo period during when the black ships arrived from the United States, forced, opened Japan to trade and everything like that, and then the Bakumatsu period occurred, and then eventually the Meiji Restoration. I think it was actually Emperor Meiji, when he rose to power, changed the name from Edo to Tokyo, which it is today. So there we go. There's some history about Japan. All right. Then below the mainland of Wano, we of course have Onigashima, which I said I will go into further detail with in another installment of Geography is Everything. Oda has came out and said that Onigashima is actually based off of Hokkaido, which led to a little bit more confusion from me because I originally assumed that the Ringo region was based off of Hokkaido. Hokkaido is an island, is the most northern region of Japan, their northernmost island, and it's also the coldest region. Weather in Japan is actually very varied because Okinawa is all the way to the south and sort of disconnected from the rest of the Japanese archipelago, and Okinawa is, a southern island. It's very sunny, it's very warm there, and then all the way to the top you have Hokkaido, which is typically very cold, all right? Ringo is always shown snowing in Wano, so I assumed that it was based on Hokkaido, but no, as you can see from the original sketch art, Hokkaido or Onigashima was originally supposed to be on top of Wano until Oda changed it for story-based reasons. I believe the reason why Oda changed it is because he wanted the rebellion to leave from the Udon region and the Hakumai region, and to make that make sense, he had to move Onigashima down. But it's still based on Hokkaido, and it makes sense. It's a separate island that's very, very cold. Meanwhile, the Ringo region is based off Tohoku, which is the most northern region of Honshu. So it's the second coldest region of Wano, right, or second coldest region of Japan, right after Hokkaido. And for this reason, and Artur even said this, Okinawa is most likely not referenced at all because it's so far disconnected from the rest of main island Japan, so there's really not a direct parallel to Okinawa in Wano, although who knows, maybe the Straw Hats are sailing to the next island, maybe they'll bump into a summer island, and it turns out that, there are people from Wano living there, and oh yeah, we disconnected from Wano centuries ago, we're just living here now, and that's the parallel to Okinawa. Who knows? It could happen, right? So anyway, yeah, that's the basic geography and the comparisons. So now let's go into each individual region. I have them in no particular order. Let's just start with the Ringo region because that's the first region here. Also, I like Ringo Starr. I like the Beatles. Pretty cool. Ringo was a great drummer. So let's just start with that. Okay. The Ringo region. So the Ringo region is located here to a northern part of Wano. Keep in mind, this map actually is not north on top and south on the bottom. It's actually shifted a little bit there. This is the region that is a very old traditional part of Wano, and this is the most indicative in the northern graveyard. Most of the time we go to Ringo, we actually don't see a lot of towns or cities. We typically just see this giant, expansive graveyard where some of the greatest heroes, the greatest samurai that ever lived, are laid to rest here. In fact, there's a tradition amongst the people of Ringo. When someone is born, they are given a sword, and then when they grow old and die, that same sword is their grave marker. So for that reason, there's a lot of really strong swords of Meito grade just lying around the graveyard. Now, ordinarily, the people of Wano respect their own traditions, and this is very hallowed ground, so nobody would dare to steal these swords and weapons from this graveyard. Of course, when, Kaido and Orochi showed up, all bets were off. So that's why Kawamatsu and Onimaru took it upon themselves to take all the swords and everything and keep them in a safe place so that, Kaido couldn't get his hands on some of the greatest Meitos that were ever forged, right? This is also the region where the sword god Ryuma himself is laid to rest, although we never actually saw his grave. It's also the place where they're going to build a temple in honor of Izo and Ashura Doji and probably all of the people that died in the Battle of Onigashima and all of the people that died throughout the 20 years that Kaido and Orochi ruled Wano in this horrible, horrible winter, metaphorical winter that Wano had been, in for so long. I can imagine them building some kind of monument to sort of honor the dead of all the people that suffered up until this point to finally be liberated, by the Straw Hats and everybody that were there that helped out and everything, okay? Now, every region of Wano also includes a port, and each port is named after a specific animal, okay? I love this. I just love the idea that Oda's doing that with, like, the individual regions are named off of regions from Japan, but they're also named after food, but there's also different ports, and each port has a different cute little animal name. I'd eat that shit up. I don't know why. I just love it, okay? Now, we didn't really get to see the ports of every single region of Wano, and Ringo is an example that we never got to see the port of, but it's actually the Kaeru port. Kaeru port. The frog port. So go check out Kaeru over on Twitter. He's the awesome artist that does all the artwork on Rustage's hit D&D series, such as Rustage Presents One Piece D&D and Rustage Presents Isekai D&D. So go and check that guy out. He's pretty cool. Okay. Anyway, we also have the Hanayanagi Dance School, which is the dance school that was taught by Izo Inokiku's father, who was eventually killed. So it would imply that Izo and Okiku are both from the Ringo region of Wano. So that's where they come from. And then we have Oihagi Bridge, or the Bandits Bridge, which was the bridge that leads into the Eternal Graveyard, which is where Gyukimaru, who is actually Onimaru, cosplaying Kawamatsu, who was originally cosplaying as Gyukimaru. If you've read Wano, this makes perfect sense to you. If you haven't, you're just there like, this is raising so many further questions. Whatever. I'll make it simple for you. Onimaru is a fox that has the ability to turn into a man. There you go. Okay. Because he has a devil fruit. All right. Awesome. So there's a bridge right there. This is where Gyukimaru was guarding it. This is where he originally fought against Zoro. And then Killer showed up, or, Kamazo the Killer showed up and fought against Zoro in front of this bridge. This is where Hiyori and Otoko ran into Zoro. And then they fled and they hid inside of this house inside of the graveyard. All right. Let's see. Also on top of food and the different ports of Wano, each individual region is headed up by a Yakuza boss, because there's the Yakuza in Wano, which is a really big part of it. Hyogoro was the boss, the big boss at the Flower Capital, but each individual region had their own boss as well. And the boss of the Ringo region was Cho, the only female Yakuza boss, so you don't want to mess with her. And on top of that, each individual member of the Yakuza is based off of an animal as well, I believe. And in the case with Cho, she is based off of a butterfly, because her name Cho literally means butterfly, okay? So there you go. She has like a butterfly kind of hair. So yeah, you don't want to piss her off there. Also, I wrote down that Ryuma might have been from here because he was buried here, which doesn't necessarily mean he's from there, but he was a Shimosuke, and the daimyo of this region was Shimosuke Ushimaru, who was the master of Onimaru, okay? And of course, all the daimyos ended up dying initially in the battle with Kaido. Odin was killed by Kaido. The three remaining daimyos, Ushimaru, as well as the daimyo of the Kibi and Udon regions, were killed by Kaido, and Yasue was the only one that survived, but he was eventually killed by Orochi in the present storyline, okay? So yes, the Shimosuke clan also rules over the Hakumai region, which is the next region we're going to talk about, but we're going to talk about this more in detail near the end of the video in a different section, but I believe this is the ancestral homeland of Ringo. I'm getting very ancestral vibes from it, and that might be because that region of Japan, Tohoku as well as Hokkaido, was the original region where the Jomon people settled. So, little bit of history, modern history, or ancient history in our modern world, okay. The Jomon people were the first indigenous people to reach the island of Japan way back in the day. So back when humans were leaving Africa and they were spreading all over the world, the first people to reach the island of Japan, it was very different back then because we're talking about, tens of thousands of years ago, were the Jomon people. And they mostly settled in what is now Hokkaido and northern Honshu, which is the Tohoku region, okay? Then, way later on, like we're talking like near the end of the BC going into AD, is when the Yayoi people entered into Japan from China and Korea, and then, mingled with the Jomon people, which is where we get the precursor to pretty much every modern Japanese person is descended from, the Yayoi people, okay? So for that reason, okay? So that makes a little sense there, I guess. So that's the reason I'm getting the vibe of, like, Ringo being a very traditional, very old-school region of Wano, okay? And we'll get more into that as we explore it, okay? So yes, that is Ringo. Now, moving on to HAKUMAI, the HAKUMAI region. This is a region that is mostly covered in fall leaves. Each region has sort of like a season theme to it. Ringo was winter, obviously, and HAKUMAI is autumn, which to me honestly sounds perfect. I would love to live in the HAKUMAI region out of all the regions of Wano. It's like October year-round. You could celebrate Halloween all the time. Jack Skellington would love it. Actually, wait, no, Jack Skellington hated it because he was tired of them celebrating Halloween all the time, so he went over to the Christmas land, and that was the whole point of that movie. Yeah, so I guess Jack Skellington would hate HAKUMAI. What do you have against HAKUMAI, Jack? You get to drink pumpkin spice lattes year-round. Yeah, anyway, the daimyo of this region, as we said, is another Shimosuke, Shimosuke Yasuie, who I believe is, and this is never explained, this is more headcanon for me, but I like to think that Ushimaru Shimosuke and Ryuma Shimosuke were part of the main family of the Shimosuke clan. And then something happened to the original daimyos of HAKUMAI, and then a branch family of the Shimosukes, led by Yasuie, were the ones that took up the daimyo status there. I have more on this, but we'll talk about that when we start talking about the government of Wano, more particularly at the end of this video. Okay, so in HAKUMAI, we have a few different regions. We have the Enma Shrine, which is actually the shrine where I believe Hiyori did, in fact, hide Enma, but I don't know if it's like the name of that, like Enma Shrine. I think Hiyori might have just called it that because that's where the Enma, the sword of Odin, was hidden. It also might just be a generic temple in honoring of Enma or Yanma, who is like, King Yema, who is the sort of the judge when you go to the afterlife, and he's the kind of guardian of hell, is the great King Enma or Yema, okay? So that might be a reference to that there. That's also where Zoro and Hiyori hung out for a little bit. That's where Zoro defeated a lot of the ninjas are there, and that's also the place where Denjiro hung out and, contorted his face in absolute rage over the years after the death of Odin, and then he finally emerged, and he wandered into the Flower Capital and began his new life as Kyoshiro, all right? So Denjiro lived there for a number of years. The Yakuza boss of this region is Sunogoro. Sunogoro meaning broken hat, and he's like the creepiest out of all of the members of the Yakuza there. Oh, Orochi also lived here for a time because he was living with Yasuie at his residence. We also have the Mogura port. So this was the port that actually accesses Wano from underneath. So you actually have to go through the bottom of HAKUMAI, and then you arrive at this little pavilion sort of area, and then you can enter Wano properly here. And then the actual port, as in like the port for like ships and stuff like at the water, is the Habu port. Habu port referencing a viper or a pit viper in Japanese. So we have a frog and now we have a snake. Keep track, kids. There will be a quiz. Then we have Habu Wharf, which is off to the side of Habu Port, which is more of like just a private little port, a private wharf that Yasue really liked. And the whole reference there was that you had Orochi's giant procession leaving mainland Wano to go to Onigashima for the fire festival. They left from Habu Port. However, the rebellion that had all these ships that were built to go and fight against Orochi and Kaido were just a little bit off to the side, hiding in the forest, and then they emerged afterwards, okay? However, Kinemon messed up the message, and they went to the port in Udon, which we'll get to, eventually. All right, so yeah. Enma Shrine, Mogura Port, Habu Port, and Habu Wharf, as well as Yasuie's own personal residence where he lived as the daimyo, is in the HAKUMAI region. Really nice area. That's the place I would probably want to live the most if I did end up traveling to Wano there. All right, Moving on, we now have the KURI region of Wano, which is located all the way on the lefternmost side there. This is a region that was originally very lawless until Odin came to town. It's named after, I said, Japanese chestnuts, and its basis is the island of Kyushu, which is located at the southern point of Japan. And I know a lot about Kyushu because you know the series I'm going to reference. I reference it all the time. Drifters by Kota Harano. Check it out. And I know the Shimatsu clan is from Kyushu, which the main character of Drifters is Shimatsu Toyohisa. And now that I actually think about it, Toyohisa and Odin, they actually have a lot in common. I think they would get along quite well, I have to say. Indeed. Anyway, so this is actually the region the Straw Hats visited first. This is the place that a lot of ships first arrive when they climb up the Koi waterfall. If they just keep sailing straight, they eventually end up on a beach at KURI, okay? So Luffy woke up, and of course he saw, like, a giant baboon holding a katana, and then a dog attacking the giant baboon, and then Luffy's pretty much like, yep, I guess I'm in Wano. There's a giant baboon holding a sword, so I guess I'm in Wano now, right? Not far after the beach, we have Otama's hometown, Amagasa Village, or Straw Hat Village. Not the kind of straw hat Luffy wears, the casa hats that you make, right? And so this village was actually completely obliterated by the time that Luffy arrived. Originally, I guess it was sort of not really a thriving village. No village could really be considered thriving as long as Orochi is in charge, other than the flower capital. But it was a place that, like, a few people lived until Drake, for some reason, showed up and then just demolished the entire place. I don't think we actually ever got a reason for that. So the only two residents by the time Luffy arrives are Otama as well as Tenguyama Hitetsu, who later we find out is actually the former shogun of Wano, Sukiyaki Kozuki, who was the father of Odin, right? So there we go. This is also the place I would assume Otama's parents lived and worked and then eventually died. By the way, I don't think it's 100% confirmed, but I think somebody did look at the tombstones for Otama's parents, and they were confirmed to be members of the Kurozumi clan. So take that whatever you will. So not far after Amagasa Village, we have Okabore Town, which is a leftover town. And then after Okabore, we have the Bokora Town, which is the place where all of the leaders, headliners, and governors of KURI live. So with each region of Wano, there is one particular town in each region where, like, Orochi and Kaido's minions live. So that place is going to be kept fairly well off. It's going to be kept clean, and there's a lot of food, and there's clean water, because Orochi and Kaido's men live there, okay? So they're sort of like the leaders of that region. And then outside of every single one of those towns is what's called a leftover town, which is the place where they chuck their leftovers and their garbage, and the regular citizens of Wano have to live in squalor and starving to death and drinking, you know, tainted, polluted water in order to survive. So Okabore Town is the leftover town of Bokora Town, just like how Ebisu Town is the leftover town of the flower capital proper, all right? And those are the only two that we know. I would assume the KIBI region, Udon region, Ringo, and HAKUMAI all have towns in them where Kaido and Orochi's minions used to live, and then there were headliners that ruled those areas, and then there were leftover towns beyond them as well. We just never learned about them, right? But anyway, then we have Odin Castle, which used to be called KURI Castle, but just because Odin lived there and he was so beloved by everybody, the former daimyo, Kozuki Odin, it was called Odin Castle. So it was eventually burned down by Kaido, famously 20 years ago after Odin's death. This is also where Toki, you know, ran out of the capital, ran out of the castle, and then said at Bokora Town she gave her prophecy that, you know, in 20 years the scabbards will return. Eventually Kaido kind of obliterates it. Even the ash he burns away with his Boro breath at the beginning of the arc, so there's really not much of the castle left. However, the castle was built on a mountain with a giant cave inside of it, and inside of that cave is the Paradise Farm. So the Paradise Farm is the place where all the food and the clean water is kept for the citizens of the Bokora Town, but not the citizens of Okabore. In fact, it's a huge offense to, you know, steal food from the Paradise Farm. If you're like a regular civilian of Wano, you would probably just be killed right there on the spot if you were caught stealing anything from the Paradise Farm there. Just an idea of the injustice that Orochi and Kaido sort of set up at the place. We also have Mount Atama, or Head Mountain, named so because it resembles a samurai's head with a top knot as a cherry blossom tree. This is where Ashura Doji's Mount Atama mountain bandits hung out. Mount Atama mountain bandits. Okay, that's redundant statement, redundant, but whatever. Okay. Also, there's a massive graveyard around here in the countryside where Ashura Doji buried all of his men that prematurely attacked Kaido 10 years ago. They just couldn't wait any longer. They're like, hey, hey, if we wait any longer to attack this place, then we're going to be too old and starve to death. So they tried to attack, they got wiped out, and Ashura Doji buried them around Mount Atama, which was also attacked by Kinemon trying to get Ashura Doji to help them. So I'm hoping they'll be able to recover. Well, Ashura Doji's dead now, but hopefully the mountain bandits will be able to recover this place. And then we have the port city of Kuri, which is Itachi Port, which means weasel. So there you go. You know, I'm a big Naruto fan, so I saw Itachi, and I immediately thought, oh, it's crow, because Itachi summons crows. Why did Itachi summon crows and not weasels in Naruto? This makes sense now. Imagine if he summoned a weasel and he forced Naruto to, like, swallow the weasel, and then, like, the Koto Amatsukami shows up inside of the weasel's eye. That would have been funnier. That would have been way funnier if Itachi could summon weasels. Anyway, so there you go. A couple more things about it, just because we've explored it a lot more. Kuri, so I like to think this was the region that was originally led by the Kurozumi clan way back in the day when the Kurozumis were still daimyos. Then, after Orochi's grandfather was excommunicated, Kuri was left without a daimyo for decades, which fell into this lawless land of Wano that Ashura Doji ended up literally leading with, like, you know, power, just essentially. Just like, you know, might makes right in that instance. He was, like, the biggest bad bandit there ever was. And so then one day Odin just decided to barge into Kuri and just wiped out you know, Ashura Doji and all of his mountain bandits, claimed it for himself, and that's how Odin became the daimyo of Kuri. Interestingly enough, there is no Yakuza boss that is from the region of Kuri, although I guess you could just say Ashura Doji is, because he basically was the boss in that sense of all the bandits. So I guess you could say Ashura Doji. So yeah, there's that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, other major stuff there. I mean, this is where a lot of stuff happened at the beginning of Wano. This is where Luffy fought Hold'em and everything. Speed made her introduction. This is where they fought Hawkins very briefly. This is where Tenguyama revealed, like, okay, this is how Wano works and everything like that. This is where Luffy met Zoro. This is where Luffy got the Nidai Katetsu. So a lot of stuff happened at the beginning of Wano in Kuri. This is also where a lot of the planning stages happened for the war. They all met at Kuri before they separated. Also, I should mention at this point that each region is separated by a massive river, which makes sense because this Wano was artificially built, so it would make sense that it would have rivers and stuff running around it, and there's great bridges that connect each and every region. Orochi had them all blown up, but they'll probably be reconstructed at this point. All right, now moving on to the KIBI region of Wano, which is named after KIBI Dango, and it's based off of Chugoku, which Chugoku is a more southern portion of Japan. I think the Kansai region is also grouped into this because they're so close together. There is no region specifically based off of Kansai, so Artur just suspects that Oda took Chugoku and Kansai into one region here. So KIBI is actually the region we know the least about, and honestly, I was really hoping for Oda to reveal more about it. That's another reason why I was waiting for so long. Maybe like one chapter of Wano, like right before we leave, we'll find out something about KIBI or something, but unfortunately we don't. The Yakuza boss here is Yatape, which I believe is Snake, is what he's a reference to, Snake Eyes, and the former daimyo was Fugetsu Omusubi, who was actually named after a rice ball, or an onigiri, because his face kind of looks like a rice ball. There's only really 2 locations in KIBI that we know of, and one of them we don't really know of. It's just headcanon from me. The first place is the port city, which is we didn't get to see, but it's the Neko Port, which is named after a cat, of course. And also we have, I just wrote down weird building. That's all I wrote. Because when you look at the map, you can look in the KIBI region and you see in the mountains, you see this weird flat-topped building just out in the middle of nowhere. This building is never shown in the actual manga or in the anime. I guess it could be another prison mine, just like Udon has a prison, but it was never laid, you know, actually out by Oda. I like to think it's some kind of ancient temple. Because remember, we learned from Yamato's devil fruit. Yamato has the Makami fruit, the wolf deity of Wano. It was mentioned this wolf deity is like an old school deity of Wano that's sort of been forgotten about. And so I like to think in the KIBI region, in the mountains, there is an old temple to the Makami, to this wolf deity, and maybe KIBI will become more relevant now that Yamato decided to stay in Wano. I don't know. This is also the region that Zoro ended up by accident, and he ended up meeting Yasuie for the first time here. But other than that, we literally do not see it at all. It has really no reference. It's sort of kind of out of the action from everything else. It's just kind of there. It's KIBI. It is based on Shugoku, which is where Hiroshima is located in modern Japan. I was going to do that like an example of like certain areas. Like in Chubu, which is what HAKUMAI is based off of, we have Nagano. In the Ringo region, Tohoku is Mount Iwate. Yeah, so in Mount Iwate, sorry, not Iwate, Iwate. But yeah, just those little regions there. But yeah, other than that, we really don't know much about KIBI. I like to think maybe summer is the base for the season. There's obviously more than 4 regions of Wano, so we're going to double up a little bit here. I actually think Kuri is summer as well, or maybe spring. I'm not really sure because we saw a lot of the cherry blossoms in Kuri, so maybe that's spring, and then here in KIBI is the summer. Not really sure, but yeah, that's literally all we know about the KIBI region. I don't know if this weird building will ever be talked about beyond that, but I just wanted to bring it up here. Okay. Moving on next, we have the Udon region, based off of the island of Shikoku, one of the 5 major islands of the Japanese archipelago. The former daimyo of this land was Uzuki Tempura, named after tempura. And we know a few places here. We know the prison mine. This is the place where Luffy and Kid got chucked. Also, Caribou was there. We also had, Raizo infiltrating. Babanuki was the leader of this place, or was with a warden until Queen showed up, who was the real boss of the prison. So yeah, this is the place where all the ne'er-do-wells, all the people that really could not follow in line with Orochi and Kaido, or the people that Orochi's just paranoid of, get thrown in to work in. There's 5 different sections to the prison itself that are kind of like these giant iron doors are sort of blocked. One is like a rock quarry or like a mineral quarry where Luffy and Kid were working. Then there's like an ironworks place where you smelt things. I think there's also like a logging area. So there's like different regions of the mine where different manual labor is performed. So there's that. This is also the place where after the battle was over, Queen and King and everybody got shackled with sea stone, I imagine, and got thrown in the prison mine because there's no other place to put them, basically. Udon was also the site of the epic battle that occurred between Kaido and Odin and his scabbards 20 years ago. Odin was heading toward Onigashima. However, Kaido learned about this because of Kanjuro and sort of stopped him at Udon and is like, hey, my castle just got built. Let's not blow it up. Let's fight here, okay? This was back when Udon was a very lush jungle, a big forest area, but after the decades of pollution and deforestation, it's now become basically just an endless wasteland. Or has it? Because when Aramaki showed up, it now regrew again, so now it's back to being this very fertile jungle. So there we are. Okay, Aramaki did help out there. Now all Aramaki had to do was travel around Kuri and KIBI and the rest of Wano to have everything regrow, and I guess we would be good. Then the port here is the Tokage port, which means lizard, and it's actually funny because this was the place that originally Kinemon thought the rebellion was going to meet, but it wasn't. It was actually the port over in Habu, or the Habu Wharf. So there we are. Anyway, this was the place where they all left, and this is where Kanjuro was revealed to be the traitor. This is where Luffy and Law and Kid's crews all showed up to help fight against Kaido's crew on their way to Onigashima. So it was rather relevant for that reason, okay? But yeah, anything else about Udon? The boss of it is Omasa, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I like to think this is a summer region because it's like this big, fertile jungle back in the day, very humid, so I always imagined Udon as the summer region of Wano, but who knows there. So that's it for the 5 regions of Wano, but of course you can't have a country without a capital, and in this case we have the Flower Capital, located right dead center in the middle of Wano mainland, and of course it is based off of Tokyo, the eastern capital of Japan, although I would assume Oda probably took a lot of different references from various capitals of Japan throughout its history and threw them all into the Flower Capital in some way, shape, or form. See, there was this tradition for a very long time in Japan that whenever the emperor changed, they would change the capital city, which sounds really encumbering and a lot of problems would arise from it, and it did. But the original capital was Yamato, and then it was Nara for a while, and then it was Kyoto for a long time, and then it was Edo, and then Edo changed its name to Tokyo, which it is right now. So there you go. I think it was sometime during when the capital was Kyoto, they decided to not change it every other time the emperor died and whatever, or the emperor changed locations or something. And then eventually it got shifted to Edo during the Edo period, and then boom, it eventually became Tokyo. So yeah, there we go. There's no food reference here, but the flower capital is flowers. So, I mean, some flowers are edible. Others will probably kill you, but some flowers are edible. Sure, yeah, why not? And for this reason also, because there's so many cherry blossom trees everywhere, spring is the season that the flower capital represents. It's also the location where Mount Fuji is. This is where the bulk of the first 2 acts of Wano take place, as well as the 3rd act involving Odin's flashback. A lot of it takes place in the flower capital. This is what the flower capital looked like 40 years ago, before Orochi came to power, and this is what it looked like while Orochi is in power. Now, it's still a nice place because this is where Orochi lives, so he doesn't want to live in squalor, but if you kind of zoom out, you can see that there was way more, trees and foliage and life pretty much everywhere. It was a much bigger city than it was now, okay? We know 2 districts of the flower capital. We know the red light district, giggity, and then we also know the Rasetsu town district, or Rasetsu is literally in reference to a Hindu spirit, the Rakshasa, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, I apologize, but it's like an evil spirit. And so the Rasetsu town district, or Rasetsu district, is the place where the prison galley is, where the gallery, I keep saying prison galley, like it's the place where the prisoners eat or something like that. No, it's the prison gallery, which is like the main prison in the flower capital. This is where law was thrown in and for a while. This is where they were rounding up all the members of the Kozuki clan that had the crescent moon crest and throwing them in there and all that kind of jazz, right? Then we have the palace, which is where the shogun lives. There you go. Sukiyake was the shogun, followed by Orochi, and now Momonosuke is now the proper shogun. Sad that Odin never got to sit on the chair and become the proper shogun of Wano, but what can you do? His son managed to do it, so I guess that's okay. Then we have a big meeting hall, which is at the base of this giant tree where the palace is. We saw the meeting hall in the last chapter, or the last chapter of Wano, where that teacher was there doing the Rakugo performance. He was, wait, nope, that's a ruler. There you go. This is the fan. The Rakugo performance telling the story of the Battle of Onigashima to all of the citizens. So there's like a big meeting place for them to be there. I imagine that place would also be used for like politics and like speeches and things like that. There's a lot of schools that are located in the flower capital that used to teach, the propaganda of Orochi, and that Odin and the Kozuki clan were bad. The sad thing is that's probably going to take a while to kind of reverse, because the kids in Wano were raised with like, Odin and the Kozuki clan are evil, and so now they have to be taught differently, so we'll see how that goes. There's a lot of bathhouses, which was the funny scene with Nami and the happiness punch, and you had Drake there, and hey, Drake was he didn't look because he was just too bashful, so there we go with Drake. He's a gentleman. Mount Fuji, which we've already discussed at length, and Ebisu Town, which is located outside of the flower capital, which is their leftover town, which is where a lot of the citizens live that were consuming the faulty smiles, the smiles that did not give a devil fruit ability. Orochi threw them into leftover town so all the people could eat them. So now the people of Ebisu Town are all smiling and grinning and laughing. However, they cannot express any other emotion. Yasue also lived there and was known as the Buddha of Ebisu Town because he tried to cheer up all the citizens as best as he could. He himself did not eat a smile, but he still smiled every single day for his subjects in this dark time. Rest in peace, Yasue. Also, this is where he died. This is where Orochi shot him at the Rasetsu district. Let's see here. Hyogoro was, of course, the Yakuza boss here, also the big boss of the entire area. There was also another Yakuza boss that was competing with Hyogoro way back in the day, but I forget his name. It was mentioned during the flashback, but we never saw him. There was sketch artwork of him in the Road to Laugh-Tale, but beyond that, we don't know anything else about that guy. So yeah, that is the flower capital. All right, so those are all of the regions of Wano, sans Onigashima, and we'll get to that later, as I said. So now, before we go, I thought it would be a good idea just to go over the different daimyos and the government and some little fun facts, miscellaneous things about Wano. So let's cover that. Wano number 1 is actually the origin point for the sea stone mineral in all of the land of One Piece. We don't know the name of the planet of One Piece, but the planet of One Piece, all sea stone, or at least most of it, originates from Wano. So that's interesting in and of itself. Maybe Pluton it's a giant battleship that's made out of sea stone or coated with sea stone or sea stone weapons or something like that. Who knows? Sea stone RPG, sea stone giant armory cannon things. I don't know. But most sea stone comes from here. So also most of the most skilled sea stone craftsmen are also from here. Kind of another reference to Game of Thrones with like Valyrian steel. Only a certain people in the world know how to reshape Valyrian steel. Kind of the same thing, where sea stone is sort of found throughout the world, but the only people that know how to refine sea stone down into like bullets or nails or really small weapons are the craftsmen that live in Wano. Wano also used to be known as the country of gold way back in Ryuma's day. Whether this means that there was just a lot of gold in the land, or maybe it was more of a metaphorical title, like there was a reference to it or something. You know, it's like a title. It's like the Golden Land because it was like the Golden Age because everything was really prosperous there at a time. Who knows? Also, they have an alliance with the Minks of Zou, and this was something that came to during the Void Century a long time ago between the Minks and the Kozuki clan. A lot of people have brought up that opening Wano probably involves Zunisha, the giant elephant, actually draining all of the rainwater out of Wano, and then the walls come down and then Pluton is activated. Of course, that did not happen in this arc, but it will still probably happen at some point in the story. So there's some little fun facts there. Now let's talk about the daimyos. So a very long time ago, at least the furthest back that we know of so far, there was the Kozuki clan, which were the shogun. And it's interesting because in the Japanese caste system with the pyramid, the emperor is usually on top, and then the shogun. Sometimes the emperor has more power, sometimes the shogun has more power. It depends on what era of Japanese history you're in, okay? However, a reference to an emperor in Wano only comes about with Kaido, Kaido being the emperor or the Yonko, okay? But when it comes to the actual system of Wano, there is no emperor. Shogun is as high as you can go. And the Kozuki clan were originally the shoguns, okay? And then there were 5 daimyos that led each individual region. So the Kozuki clan ruled over the flower capital, and then the 5 daimyo clans ruled over each of the 5 different regions. Onigashima, we do not know. Back in the day, it used to not be called Onigashima. Maybe it was under the jurisdiction of somebody, but honestly, we get the vibe that it was always kind of like a forbidden place that even the citizens of Wano didn't really want anything with until Kaido finally arrived and turned it into his fortress. And it's believed he's the one that gave it the name Onigashima, okay? So, yeah, it was probably called something else back then. But the giant, the skull dome, the giant skull with everything, that was still there. So we'll find out more about that later. So here's the interesting part. Back during the time period, and we found out this information from Higurashi Kurozumi, when she was explaining the past to Orochi, she mentioned that before Sukiyaki was born, there were the 5 clans. There were Fugetsu, Amasuki, Uzuki, Kurozumi, and the Shimosuki, okay? And the Kozukis were, you know, the supreme rulers, the shoguns, okay? Orochi's grandfather of the Kurozumi clan attempted to have all the other daimyos killed. In fact, I think he succeeded, so he could make himself the next shogun because the current shogun had not had a child yet. So it was looking like that shogun was not going to have a child, and so Orochi's grandfather was plotting to try to take that, you know, the title of shogun away from him. So, eventually, Sukiyaki was born as sort of a miracle child, and then Kurozumi's plot was found out, and he was executed. And this led to the Kurozumi hunts all over Wano, where if you saw somebody of the Kurozumi clan, you would chase after them and, like, burn them at the stake. It was a really rough time, okay? Now, we know that Sukiyaki, because he's still alive, is 81 years old, which means this flashback occurred 81 years ago. Whenever Higurashi was talking about the 5 daimyos, Kurozumi's being one of the daimyos, and the Kozukis as the shogun, that was 81 years ago, or I guess a little bit over 81 years ago, because it was before Sukiyaki was born, that this was the status quo. Something interesting to bring up. The Amasuki clan was also a daimyo, and they're no longer daimyos. Amasuki is the family name of Toki, who was from the Void Century, okay? So it's rather interesting. We know that the Kurozumi clan were excommunicated and they were dropped from grace as daimyos because of what Orochi's grandfather did. But no explanation was given. 80-something years ago, the Amasuki clan were daimyos, and now in the current story, they are not. So, I have a theory here. Let's go through the different names of the clans and what they mean in relative to each other, okay? And then we'll get to it, okay? So each daimyo clan, except for the Kurozumis, has the kanji for moon. So Zuki or Suki is how you actually say it in Japanese, or Getsu is another way to say it, as in the Fugetsu clan, okay? So Kozuki means light moon, Fugetsu means wind moon, Amasuki means heaven's moon, Uzuki means rain moon, Shimosuki means frost moon, and Kurozumi is the one outlier, which means black charcoal, which I have to say right there, you have these 5 clans that are in charge of ruling your land, and it's like, you know, I am the moon of heaven. I am the moon of the wind. I am the moon of the frost. And it's like, I am black charcoal. Like, one of these things is not like the other. You know, I don't know. It's weird. Anyway, so those were the different titles that we had, okay? And so Kurozumi's plot was found out, and they're no longer daimyos, okay? So now we only have the Kozuki clan and 4 daimyos. As I said previously, I like to think that the Kurozumis were originally in charge of the Kuri region. And so 80-something years ago, well, I guess 81 years ago when Sukiyaki was born, their daimyo status was dropped and Kuri just fell into absolute ruin. Sukiyaki even said during Odin's time, he said that, you know, Kuri might as well be a separate country because I have no authority there. I can't do anything about it, okay? So that was the lawless land, and it had been the lawless land. By the time Odin went to go fight Ashura Doji, that was like 40 years ago, okay? So this was 80 years ago. So this was like, it was a lawless land for a good 4 decades by the time that Odin finally rolled up and beat the shit out of Ashura. You know what I mean? Okay. So that makes sense. But what about Amasuki? Well, there's a few explanations for this, actually. If Kurozumi, if Orochi's grandfather really did kill the other daimyos, what if it's a situation where the Amasuki clan family just ended right there? What if the head of the Amasuki clan did not have an heir, and so Kurozumi killed them, and now the Amasuki clan is just extinct. It's just gone, okay? Now, that's why I think the Ringo region was originally led by the Shimosukis, and the Hakumai region's daimyo clan was originally the Amasukis, okay? But then, because the Amasuki clan ended, they're like, okay, we don't want the Hakumai region to fall into despair because it's not their fault. So the Shimosuke branch family decided to pick up the reins, and Yasue decided to, you know, gain control over it, and he became the daimyo. So that's the reason why Shimosukis rule over 2 regions, whereas every other daimyo clan only rules over 1. Interesting factoid. I guess except the Kozukis, because Kozukis were the shoguns, flower capital, but also Odin became the daimyo of Kuri, so effectively he was also, the Kozuki clan were the daimyos of Kuri, as well as being the family that were the shoguns. So there you go. So yeah, that's the situation. Like I said, that's my headcanon. I don't know. All I do know is that 80 years ago, Amasuki was a daimyo clan, and it's not anymore. Now, what does this have to do with Toki? Who knows? I guess we'll find out in the future. Because Toki's devil fruit allows you to travel to the future. Okay. I think we're done. Holy crap. Now, we're not done entirely because we still have a whole other video on Onigashima to discuss. But, man, this video on Wano, this is a long one, all right? There was a lot of stuff to cover here, but I hope at least this will give you a better idea of the land of Wano, the different regions, the different daimyo clans, the different food they're based off of, the different Yakuza bosses and all that crap. Oh, man, a lot of geography, but you know what? I love it. I love geography. I love history, man. That's what it's all about, and that's what Oda makes his story awesome. Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. I don't have lemming facts for you today because this was already a long video that took me a lot of time to prepare. Thanks again to Artur at the Library of Ohara for helping me out big time with a lot of this. This will be Tekking, Amberi, Hiyori, Wano, Variant Robin, Geography B. Thanks for showing up. Tekking, signing out. And now we draw the curtain.